Hello, and welcome to Remote Stories, the show where we interview remote workers from all over the world. I'm Preston Wickersham with Remote, the company helping businesses of all sizes employ global teams. With me today from Manila is AJ Dimarucot, a freelance designer, art director, and entrepreneur. AJ, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Preston.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. You are working in Manila, so tell me why other people should want to work remotely where you live. What makes it special to work remotely in Manila?
Oh well, if you haven't been to the Philippines, the traffic here is one of the worst in the world, and that's really why I had left the corporate day job here in the Philippines. It was like 12 years ago, before remote work was cool. It was literally working in the office was having such a huge toll on my health and my relationships, and that I had to make a big decision and say, working in the office is just not literally not good for me anymore. And so I had to leave that and was sort of like forced into an in situation where I had to make money while I was at home. And that's how I really, it kind of blossomed and into like full-time remote work when I discovered that I could do that precisely, just scouring the web and trying to look for clients and jobs and gigs in the so-called gig economy, and found success in that, and I haven't stopped since. And yeah, that place where I used to work was probably, if there was no car, there was no other car on the road, it would be like a 10-minute drive, 15-minute drive from here. But it would, in like the traffic situation of the every people working, that would take an hour, at least an hour and a half, and for like a 10-15 minute drive.
Oh,
um, so it's crazy. So yeah, so
wow. What was
traffic
that?
and
What was
effect
that
on the
transition like? I mean, you made decided to make that change, and then you started working from home. While everything is so busy and jam packed around you. Did you find a lot of local clients, or were you immediately working internationally? What was that?
immediately it was international, because it really started like probably 6 months prior, or 7 months, or even probably more, in 2007, when, because at the end of that year, I was to be my wife and I were to be married in like December of that year, so I had to augment my income with freelance work, and then really discover that, man, like working a few hours, daily or weekly after my day job, or even the weekends, I could cover my costs. I could essentially pay for my partly for the wedding, and that's when I really was planted in my head that I can probably do this full time, and it was just so much better for my health, and also financially, because of the and peso exchange. um you know the hours that you put was just exponentially, I guess, like paid for by a much better currency. So yeah,
All right.
and but the good thing was, the decision wasn't like really, it was hard, but not as hard, because at that point my wife was still had a day job, so I kind of became like the freelance income, not feast or famine. It's like, it's not secure. It's sometimes there's work, sometimes there's not, which is the reality of freelancing. So it really became another issue, or another level of that, when my wife said, I'm also tired of doing corporate work, and I want to give up the day job. And that was really another conversation altogether.
No, no. I mean, absolutely, that makes total sense. So have others in your community started doing the same thing, working remotely? Has remote work had a big impact on, where you live for the
Yes,
other people?
yes. Remote work is pretty huge in the Philippines, um, and not just within my industry of design. Although design is primarily the biggest. At least when you look at like the online labor index website, it's tracking all these websites for the freelance marketplaces. A majority of that is really, creative design work like myself, copywriting, video, animation, and whatnot. But there's also a huge number of people here who have started remote work as virtual assistants. So if I'm pretty sure you're aware of what those are and what they do. It's essentially, entrepreneurs starting a business in the West, trying to find somebody to take care of like these little daily things in their business, like managing their email inbox, or putting images in their Amazon stores or whatnot. So there's a whole bunch of that industry here in the Philippines, and I'm sort of trying to be the face, or the voice, at least in my industry, which is the creative industry, and trying to have more of us here in the Philippines do what I do.
Awesome. No, I mean, that's obviously something I think we all want, is to, democratize that access to opportunity and make sure that
Yes.
people can, can work for a good salary and doing what they love to do, no matter where they are in the world. So that's an awesome objective, and something to keep in mind for sure. Do you have like a, I don't know, like a favorite story about working remotely where you are, and something that maybe wouldn't have been possible if you hadn't made the switch to remote work?
Yes, I actually have one, like for a very big client. It was at that point when we were traveling to Singapore, which is a few hours away from the Philippines, and my client, who was out of China at that time, Shanghai, he told me, hey, we have a big project coming. Are you available? And those dates fell on those dates where I was supposed to travel, and it was such a big client of mine that I could have said no, but I said yes, despite knowing that I was going to do travel like for leisure. Um, and and so I was in and so I had to form a team out here. So I was in Singapore, and then my team was here in the Philippines, and I was going back and forth with my client in Shanghai at the time, and he was going back and forth with his client in the United States. So it was just multi country project. Is so big in that, and I crossed over to Malaysia at that point, because we were vacationing essentially while I was trying to manage this project. And my team, my main guy in the Philippines, while my kids were riding like having fun, and, in the rides, and they were, I think we were in Legoland at that time, and so we were just enjoying ourselves, and my main guy called me and said, I gotta quit. I can't do this anymore. And then I'm like all my like happiness at that moment and joy, was like pulled from me, from underneath me, and so, but we managed to. I told him, okay, it's okay, I understand. And so thankfully I had managed to not tell my kids that we gotta go at this moment. I have to finish something for my client. So just enjoyed that day, and it was really the end of the day when we were almost going to leave and go back to Singapore, which is like a border away, right? So, and and we got stuck in the border a little bit for like 30 minutes and an hour, and so, and then having to go back to Singapore and trying to manage this situation that was exploding right in front of me, and hopefully was able to pull it off by me trying to, um, so I lost my main guy, and so I had to do some work in Singapore while just to deliver this something to my client, and for him to show to the client in the US. So after that, we were able to do it. I got to do it, right. So that deliverable. And so you cannot do that. You can never do that without remote work. You cannot imagine that ever happening without the possibility of in the internet and remote work, right.
No,
So
yeah.
that was just and it's such a big client of mine. So
Yeah, that is
yeah,
a very remote work story, is, working
it
across
is.
multiple countries with, someone dropping out, and then yeah, having to do that on the fly, and all the while, traveling with your family, and making it happen, just making it happen in any way you
Yep.
can. That is the remote work life for sure. I just have one more question, kind of based on everything you've told me. If you had so given your experiences, I mean, again, you've been working remotely for, more than a decade now, so you know a lot about how this works and how it should work. If you could give one piece of advice to companies that have remote workers today, what would you tell them?
One advice for me is really, um, at least in the Philippines, is to not fall into the trap of trying to control other people out here. If it's and when I what I mean by that is I've come across, and also um, I've avoided companies that like literally have to count the hours and also do like screenshots of. So I suppose it's like a time checking or like a time tracking software, um, where it is based on the lack of trust between companies. And that's something that I really like about Yob. Actually, he's talking about, you deliver the work wherever you are, whenever is the best time for you to do that work. And because a lot of people here also fall into the trap of, um, you know, for one, they're very highly underpaid, even though they are being paid by somebody outside the country. They are paying rates that are even lower than what our rates here, which is that's so crazy. That's one, and then also the idea of not trusting the people enough to have to um, like watch every keystroke that they make on their computer. Because to me, because I have heard stories where some of them have actually done the like programmed like ways for them to do keystrokes. So if it comes from a place of not trusting people, then I don't think that will ever be a healthy relationship between the employer and the employee. So those are like the major ones that I have thought about. Also, now because of remote, I've also started to even tell my clients from before, like if we ever hire some people here, you should consider remote, and because they would be you know um, legitimately hiring somebody locally, where I haven't really considered that before, because my old mindset was that, oh, you hire me, you give me a contract, I thought I was an employee, right? So, and a lot of the Filipinos here, they don't know what an employee is or a contractor is. So yeah,
Yeah,
those are the things that I would suggest.
that's excellent. That's a great advice, AJ, and a great note to end on is trust, as always. So, yeah, thanks again for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me again. So
Absolutely.
anytime.